استنى بس طلع لنا تيجي نروح مع بعض.
أنا مش أختك.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing a gem of a film, Inshallah a Boy. Briefly, the film follows Nawal, who must fight for what she considers to be the inheritance of her only daughter in a region of the world where having a son changes everything. The film opens up with Nawal attempting to retrieve her fallen bra from a wire, a fitting metaphor for the personal liberation she would achieve by the end of the film. Nawal's life changes when her husband suddenly dies in his sleep. Her husband's death sends her into a downward spiral, leaving her very vulnerable and exposed in a very hostile world. The film is set in Amman, Jordan, and during what seems to be very difficult economic times. Most people struggle to make ends meet, while others live comfortably, untouched by the country's financial strain. The film powerfully highlights the religious, class, and generational divides that uphold a system disproportionately harmful to women. Her husband's death forces Nawal to not only fend for herself, but also leads her to the painful realization that neither her husband or his family really cared for her at all. From what we see, Nawal has been a very dutiful and loyal wife, mother, and sister. Those around her hold her in a high regard, mostly because she spent her life meeting expectations and doing exactly what she's told. After her husband's death, her brother-in-law approaches her regarding her husband's debts, something that comes as a surprise to Nawal. And she's not just surprised by her brother-in-law's vulgarity, given the timing he's bringing this up shortly after the funeral, but also the fact that she had no idea that her husband was paying off debts. And to make matters worse, every time she tries to ask questions or probe, no one feels the need to explain anything to her. Instead, it's almost as if they're giving her commands and instructions and they expect her to follow it without much pushback. And throughout the film, she's forced to negotiate her way out of these decisions that have already been made for her. To make ends meet, she takes care of the dying relative of a wealthy Christian family. When she returns to work following her husband's funeral, they offer her condolences, but at the same time make it clear that they are extremely relieved that she's back at work. Unlike her employers, Nawal did not have the privilege of preparing for her husband's death. She was denied the chance to say goodbye as well as any closure. Throughout the film, it's clear that the woman Nawal cares for is well looked after. Her former colleagues, her former friends come to say goodbye. I thought the film skillfully balances each character's storyline to offer a broader commentary on how the many laws regulating relationships between men and women are harshly draconian. Nawal's pain is contrasted by her employer's daughter, Lauren. Initially, she's introduced to us as a bit of a spoiled brat. However, her struggles gradually come to light. She is married to a man who repeatedly cheats on her and treats her poorly. Although she wants a divorce, her very strict religious mother forbids it. Lauren's mother embodies how these laws have shaped and damaged generations of women. Lauren has been raised to believe that appearances matter more than reality and repeatedly warns her daughter that her ambitions are unrealistic and potentially dangerous. As far as her mother is concerned, she married this man and now she's stuck with him and she's going to have to find a way to manage. And at one point, she even gives her the example of Hillary Clinton in terms of showing how, in fact, staying with a man that treats you poorly is a sign of honor and respect, something that her daughter just refuses to believe. Unfortunately for Lauren, she doesn't take her mother's warning seriously until it's too late. Although Lauren has grown up with way more privileges, she's just as constrained and restricted as Nawal. And given the way that both women are treated, I mean, they appear to be in similar age brackets, you actually cannot even tell they're from two different religions outside of their clothing. This lack of distinction reveals that many of the restrictions being placed upon them are more cultural than religious and therefore open to change. Aside from Nawal's brother-in-law, her own brother, as well as her co-worker, there aren't that many male characters in the film, so our understanding of Nawal's husband and Lauren's husband are mostly through conversations and their reactions to these men. The only real difference between Lauren and Nawal is that Lauren has the privilege of finding out the truth about her husband because of the resources she has. And this is a privilege that ultimately comes back to haunt her at the end. I loved how the film explores the limitations imposed by class and gender, showing that financial privilege doesn't necessarily translate to greater rights or personal freedom. The only real glimpse we get into Nawal's relationship with her husband is at the start of the film when she's trying to be intimate with him, but he says that he's too tired. He appears to be ill and he's taking medication, but we never find out what is making him sick. Throughout the film, Nawal keeps receiving these mysterious calls on his phone, but because she doesn't have his passcode, she's left to wonder who these callers are. As pressure increases, Noelle starts to cross boundaries she normally never would have, like searching through her husband's belongings. And when she does, she confirms what she's known deep down all along, which is that he's been unfaithful to her. Once she realizes she's been stabbed in the back, she starts to make the bold decision to explore her independence. And I thought her interactions with her coworker was honestly one of the highlights of the film. At first, she tries to go on these dating apps. You see her scrolling through Tinder, but that's not really for her. And she's not seeking a distraction. She desperately wants emotional support that she assumes she'd be getting from her family. At first, her coworker comes off as extremely creepy and disingenuous, but as the film progresses, he becomes a supportive presence, offering her a safe space to explore her emotions and emerging identity. In a pivotal moment while he's teaching her to drive, she steps out of the car without her hijab, a quiet yet powerful act of self-liberation. So much of the world around her had been controlled and curated by the men around her, and gradually she comes to realize that the world is actually a lot more accessible than she's been led to believe, that she's actually entitled to a lot more than what she thought possible, namely respect. And I like how the film uses Noelle's apartment. The film masterfully uses Noelle's apartment as a mirror of her internal collapse. After her husband's death, she starts to notice a rat in the home, something she's initially too afraid to confront. However, by the end, she really doesn't care. The rat serves as a fitting and unmistakable metaphor for her husband. And her husband not only deceived her, but he left her with nothing, except for the fragile hope of being pregnant with a son. In Jordan, as well as many other countries in the Middle East, if a woman loses her husband and doesn't have a son, part of the inheritance goes to her in-laws. The film's ending actually comes as a pleasant surprise. However, it is subtly foreshadowed at the start of the film. And I love how the film slowly builds tension. The longer the movie goes on, the more concerned you are for Noelle's safety and whether she'll survive long enough to even build a life. Tension between Noelle and her brother-in-law is so intense that she tells the judge she's pregnant even though she had no proof. And so the whole film, she's buying time until she can figure a way out. And I appreciated how the film used motherhood as a form of protection as opposed to a trap. Noelle clearly shares a very beautiful bond with her daughter. And you never get the sense that her daughter is a burden. She's constantly worried about her. She's constantly thinking about her. When Noelle announces her pregnancy to her family, it's clear that this is a distraction. However, they can't really prove it. And it never actually occurs to us that she could actually be pregnant, even though we're told at the start of the film that she had been trying for some time. I love how the film constantly positions her brother in the background. He's not there to support her. He's there to control her and keep her in check. And the way she interacts with her brother, you can tell that he really feels for her. But at the same time, he acts as if he's her father, like they don't really feel like equals. And this is something that really starts to get on Noelle's nerves the longer the movie goes on for. He shows some sensitivity. However, he makes her feel guilty every time she pushes back. At one point, he has the audacity to tell her that there are millions of widows out there and they're able to move on quietly and raise their children, so why can't you? Everyone in this movie completely downplays her grief, putting more pressure on her to take care of herself. And I think that's what makes Noelle's character so compelling, because from what we see of her, she's done everything right, and yet she finds herself completely alone. At her husband's funeral, it never occurred to her that these details would actually matter. And her ignorance regarding her husband's debts and his life allows the men around her to take advantage of her and cash out. The film uses this tense back and forth between Noelle and her brother-in-law to show how she's gradually changing and shifting. And her brother-in-law seems more frustrated by her resistance than the debt that she owes. And it feels like he's in a hurry to drain her resources as fast as possible rather than address some urgent need at home. Because Noelle comes from a very traditional home, she was never taught to be self-sufficient. She was never taught how to drive or manage her own finances or really live alone. Now that she's learning to navigate and manage her own life, she's starting to realize what little people have done for her. She was never a priority in her husband's life, let alone his family's. And at the beginning, this lack of knowledge made her fear the world instead of fight back against it. And throughout the film, especially as more and more problems come up, she's really left asking, what was the point? She did everything right only to be crushed as if she never mattered at all. She's constantly made to feel like something to be pawned off rather than respected and taken care of. The more Noelle learns and the more capable she becomes, the less afraid she is. And she starts to take risks like standing up for herself. She no longer just goes along or hides in the background. Nawal's only hope for survival is through Lauren. One of the film's most powerful scenes revolves around a conversation about sin. Nawal asks Lauren to help her fake a pregnancy test, and in doing so, the two women confront the blurred lines between morality, survival, and judgment. What this conversation reveals is the absence of context when it comes to sin. Everything is framed in black and white, designed to make them constantly feel at fault. Nawal's brother-in-law, although clearly out of line, really faces no consequences. Because he's a man, he's perceived as doing exactly what he has to do in order to provide for his family, even though it comes at the expense of his sister-in-law. At one point, her brother-in-law becomes so shameless, he starts to question her morality, and he really doesn't have much to go on. And he's questioning his sister-in-law, knowing that his brother was not only unfaithful, but unemployed. In a pivotal moment, Lauren agrees to help Nawal fake this pregnancy test if she finds her an abortion clinic. She confesses to Nawal that she doesn't want to be trapped in a life that will destroy her. Although she married for love, she's come to realize that she's actually creating, or she could potentially be creating, the same cycle. She's fought so hard to try and escape. The scene at the abortion clinic was deeply unsettling. The doctor demands Lauren's real name as well as state ID, giving him a lot of power over her. By the end of the film, it's very clear that this doctor exposed her, and Lauren does come off wealthy. And I like how the movie took place all around Jordan. And so you do get a sense of the economic hardship. And it feels like people are willing to do anything to survive. Following the abortion, Lauren goes mysteriously missing. The revelation about Lauren's condition at the end of the film comes as a horrific shock, especially since we were led to believe that something bad was going to happen to Nawal. So we weren't really concerned about the characters around her. And I love how the movie puts us in Nawal's headspace, because all she can think about is her own survival. And although she can tell that there's something deeply wrong with Lauren, she just doesn't really have the emotional bandwidth to deal with it. And it's not until the end she realizes just how bad the situation was. Not only does Lauren's husband find out about the abortion, but he beats her unconscious, and we never see her face. But Nawal's reaction to her face is all we need. Although her mother is devastated, she places the blame on her daughter, believing on a deep level she got exactly what she deserved. At this point in the film, Nawal is pretty much fed up and tells Lauren's mother that she's basically a horrible person. Like Lauren, Nawal also feels incredibly betrayed by the people that were supposed to protect her. And I think that's what's so scary about these laws, because the danger comes from the people you know, not so much outside forces. And a lot of these laws give immunity to certain family members over others to do whatever they want. At one point, Lauren's mother mentions how she's lucky that her husband didn't sue them both, even though it appears like he beat her to an inch of her life. When we learned that Nawal is pregnant, there is a huge sense of relief. As viewers, we were bracing for the worst, because she was pretty much out of time by the end of the movie, and we weren't quite sure how she was going to keep this line going. And during her conversation with Lauren before she agrees to help her fake a pregnancy test, Nawal mentions how she had this feeling that she was pregnant, and Lauren was very confused about it. She says, well, either you're pregnant or you're not. And early in the film, we realized that the reason Nawal and her husband had trouble conceiving actually had nothing to do with her. He was on medication, and he seemed to have some health issues that prevented them from having more kids. And for that reason, this child feels like a blessing, especially since her faith was wearing thin. And I like how the film announced her pregnancy at the end through her brother. And her brother barges into her apartment, throws down this piece of paper, almost relieved that she is pregnant, and starts barking orders at her, telling her that she needs to be on call, he can't ignore her until this baby comes and they find out whether or not it's a boy. And rather than follow his instructions, she takes this as a sign to finally step out on her own. The final scene ends with Nawal attempting to park her car with her daughter watching. Although the baby's gender is never revealed, it hardly matters, because by the end of this pregnancy, Nawal will be completely transformed. And overall, I think this was a beautifully constructed film. It explores the limitations placed on women without framing these challenges as impossible to overcome from within. And so overall, this is a gem of a film. And if you can stream it on Netflix, please do. It depends on the country you're in, but please look out for it on streaming, and until next time.